Hello and welcome to episode 43 of the Medical Device Success podcast and videocast. I am Ted Newell, your host. Thank you very much for listening in and or viewing. Today we add another episode to the In the C-Suite series. Our guest today is Patrick Kothe, CEO of EM Device Lab. Have you ever heard of a standard procedure being productized? You will today. It is a great strategy. EM Device Lab is a Texas-based startup that is preparing for its first product launch in less than 30 days. What I am learning from the C-Suite interviews is that every C-Suite executive is in a different situation with its own unique challenges. This is very interesting. Today, we will explore with Patrick the key characteristics of a successful startup CEO, key strategic steps that they have taken to be positioned for success, and how to get to commercial launch on fumes, and what he has learned from failure. Don't be fooled by Patrick's calm voice and demeanor. He is a driver. Most of you know that I'm the host of the MedTech Leaders community. You can learn more about this community at medtechleaders.net. It is a place where MedTech leaders and those aspiring to be leaders get together to help each other out with best practices, problems, solutions, ideas, and successes. Again, you can learn more at medtechleaders.net. There is a 30-day free trial. Also, I want to remind listeners that I do not get compensated by the people that I interview. I select the subject matter and the people I interview to be sure that I am providing the listeners with information that is helpful and interesting. If you like this podcast and videocast, please be sure to rate it, recommend it to a friend, subscribe. In the show notes, you will find a link to Pat's LinkedIn profile, the website of the company, and his favorite book. On that note, let's get together with Patrick Kothe and learn what it's like to be the CEO of a startup on the verge of commercialization. Pat, it's really great to have you on the podcast and videocast today. I'm really excited to learn more about what your role is, how you got there, EM Device Lab, and also your podcast. So if you don't mind giving us just a brief description of EM Device Lab and what your role is there.
Sure. Ted, thanks so much for having me on. Really enjoy what you're doing and the emphasis and the expertise that you're bringing into marketing professionals is really a great thing for the industry. So again, thanks for having me on. Really looking forward to a great discussion. So EM Device Lab is a startup company, and we're getting ready to launch a new product that's for treating abscesses. And it's really a different way of doing it that provides benefits to the clinician and the patient. What we're really doing is we're eliminating the need for revisits after abscesses are treated, which is a great thing for the patients, it's a great thing for the healthcare providers because extra visits aren't reimbursed. And so it's a great thing for payers as well. So in addition to that, it lessens the complication rate. It actually drops the complication rate of the procedure in half. Mm-hmm. So it's more efficacious. It's great from a cost standpoint, and it's also less painful for the patient. So we really are very excited about bringing this technology to market. So it actually started, the idea came from a couple of my partners. One partner who's an ER physician, and they were treating abscess patients with a different technique. And he says, "Hey, I can do this better." So it really came from the clinical side. And as we know, within the medical device field, most of the great ideas come from the docs. So it really came up from the clinical side. And really, we've developed a product based on a boatload of information and feedback from clinicians about the design of the product, the need for the product, and what the product can do with the patient. So we're really excited about bringing this product to market.
And your role?
I'm the CEO. This was really started with the founders of the company were two ER physicians and one biomedical engineer. And I was advising them about how to form the company and some of the company foundation things. I was CEO of another company startup at the time, but I was kind of helping out to get this company launched because I thought it was really a really great idea. And the ER physicians are trained to do medicine. They're not trained to do startup things. So kind of helping them along there. And then about a year later, I joined as CEO. They were not going to be moving out of their clinical practice. So we really needed to take the company and move it forward, bring the product out. So that's when I joined.
Okay. So what's really interesting about this company and your role is that it's a single product company with an absolutely new concept of treating an issue in the emergency room. So it's a new concept product, one product company, and because of the nature of the product, it's not a super huge regulatory hurdle, nor a really long runway to launch. Am I correct?
Well, in many of the things you said, I'm going to correct it a little bit.
Okay.
So there's two ways that people treat abscesses today. Probably about 85% of the abscesses are treated what they call incision and drainage. What an abscess is it's an infection under the skin that fills with pus. That's what it is. And what you want to do is you want to get that pus out. And the way that it's done is you take a scalpel and you make a 1 to 2 inch incision in the skin and you drain the pus out of it. And then it's an empty cavity. So that empty cavity needs to heal, need to get air in there. So you need to keep that open because if you don't keep it open, then it reinfects, fills back up. So the way it's kept open is you put gauze inside of it. And just gauze. Yeah. So you jam that gauze in there. And once that's in, you have to take it out. Anyone who's had that done will tell you how painful that is. You're yanking it out of the open wound and you're shoving some more in and you're yanking it out every day. It's just not a very pleasant thing to do, but that's what's gone on for hundreds of years. But about 15 years ago, somebody invented a new way of doing it where instead of making one big, large incision, we're making 2 small incisions and then snaking a piece of plastic through there and making a loop out of that plastic. So it could be a vessel loop or a rubber band type of product where you're just making a loop in there. And instead of jamming that gauze in, you just keep it open by that piece of plastic and the openings around that piece of plastic. You just move that tube around a couple times a day and that keeps air flowing in there and keeps it going in. So what we do is we've taken that loop technique and we productized it because there wasn't a product associated with it. So we've made it so it now goes in just like a suture. It's designed for it. It's one piece of equipment that you can do that, as opposed to what's going on with 15% of the people that are doing this right now. They have to kludge together a system to do that. So we've got a system that's ready to go to do this procedure. Now, why that's important for us is what we've got a product that already has clinical data. So we do loop procedure and there's already data for the loop procedure. So we already know that the data exists, that it cuts failure rate in half, that you have smaller incisions, patients like it better. We've just productized it a little bit different. So we can leverage that same clinical data because it's in the same category that we have, but we've got the first product to really take advantage of this. So we're looking at moving that 15% of the market that's doing the loop procedure, because this one's easier to do, that have already bought into the concept, this one's easier, but 85% of the market is virgin territory. So and that's where the real benefit comes in, because you're cutting the failure rate down, and it's a heck of a lot easier on the patient and the healthcare system to not be able to do those revisits.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that clarification. I think that's really interesting and important that you productized something that sort of existed, which definitely gives you a leg up in terms of acceptance in the marketplace. But it's also a big hint to other people that are looking at problems out there that need to be solved. The problem may be somewhat solved, but in a kludgy way, in a not so convenient way. And if you can productize it, that's a great way to get to market with something.
I really couldn't agree with you more, Ted. There are incremental improvements out there that are not incremental opportunities. There are really some large opportunities. Our market is about $1 billion, but that's divided between medical, vet, and dentistry. There's some applications that way. So it's a substantial market. It's a simple device. It's a 510K exempt product. It's a needle with a blade on the back. So you've got a needle with an 11 blade that's really on the back of that needle, and then a piece of extruded tubing that has fenestrations in it, so you can flush things through. And then at the back end, there's a lure lock and a way to attach that. Kind of a hub. There's a way to attach the tubing together to make one loop. So it's a very simple extruded tube, piece of plastic, and a needle blade on there. But there's some IP around it as well, and there's also some real trade secrets. And making that needle with a blade on the back of it is not as easy as one might think. But from a regulatory standpoint, it's a simple regulatory pathway. It's a relatively simple device to manufacture. And what's really critical here is it's simple to train. That is something that in your experience, my experience, I've been in the heart valve industry, I've been in angioplasty, been in ECG, transcranial Doppler ultrasound, really complex things. And when you have complex devices, it means long sales times. It means more training. And with a simple device, it translates into easier training and easier adoption.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you for that. Now that we understand that a little bit better, and we're going to go back to what you're doing at EM Device Lab, especially in terms of what you've built there and the experience that brought you there and so on. But I don't want to go any further without talking about your podcast, because you've got a podcast. It's relatively new. I think you've got around 9 episodes out, if I'm correct.
Yep.
And it's a great podcast. So tell us about the podcast, Mastering Medical Device.
Sure. As your listeners know, podcasts are really interesting because you can dig into topics a little bit deeper. It's not 5 minutes. You can go into a topic a little bit longer. I've been in the medical device industry, and I love the medical device industry. I've been in it for 35, going on 40 years now, and it's my passion professionally. And through the years, I've had a lot of different experiences, but I've also talked with a lot of people that are coming up, and they want to learn more about the industry, and I've really tried to give back my knowledge as well. So what this podcast is all about is it's a more well-rounded educational opportunity for people within the industry. Because Ted, your podcast is fantastic. You go deep on the marketing side of things, and that is absolutely necessary. Anybody who's in a discipline needs to go deep into that discipline. There are other podcasts that are out there that go deep into regulatory, go deep into clinical, go into quality systems, into sales, and those are great. But what I'm trying to do with Mastering Medical Device is to give people an opportunity to learn about everybody else. So it's not just marketing, where you've got marketing people talking about marketing, but marketing people need to know about sales. They need to know the topics about sales. They need to know about regulatory, about clinical, about R&D. They need to know the topics that are going on in those areas as well, because it'll make you a better marketer. And in addition to that, you may be in the ophthalmology.
Ophthalmology.
Okay, thank you, appreciate
Yes.
that. You may be in cardiology, you may be in ortho, and you may not know what's going on in the other areas. And there are things that you can beg, borrow, and steal from other areas within the medical device arena that are not being used in your area too. So what I'm trying to do with the podcast is give people exposure to other segments within your own company, other functional areas within your own company, other segments within the industry, and also a heavy dose of what's going on with customers, because that's why we're all here too, and better understanding what our customers are doing. So that's what we're trying to do with the Mastering Medical Device podcast.
Perfect. So it's called Mastering Medical Device. And I know I found it and subscribed to it on Apple. So I'm sure it's available on Spotify and a lot of
Wherever
these
you
others.
get your podcasts. Yep.
Wherever you get your podcasts, Mastering Medical Device. And I've listened to a couple of them. I really enjoyed the one with the gal that was working in the orthopedic space in the operating room. Was that correct? That she
Yes.
was in
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Because it was like being taken back into the operating room. And I spent a lot of my career in the operating room, but things have changed because you really asked her for some detail. And I enjoyed being taken back in there and thinking about that in terms of, some of the work, the consulting work and stuff I do today. So anyway, good job.
I think one of the things that we all need to learn is that we need to continue to learn, because a lot of times we get a few years on us and we say, well, I already know that, or I already know that. Well, you don't know what it's like today. So I've got a sales background, but it's been years since I carried a bag. Today's sales is different than when I was selling or when I was marketing. So it always evolves, and to keep yourself up to date is it's vital for all of us, and it's vital for us to know what's going on within other functional areas of your company, because that'll just make you a stronger team player.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's move on, and we sort of understand the framework of where you are now and what you're doing, but let's talk a little bit about how you got there and some of the important things you learned along the way. So could you just give us a brief synopsis of your career?
Sure. As I said, I started off carrying a bag. Spent my first year selling office copiers. That's a fun way to get into anything. The straight commission jobs and knocking on doors. So started off there, but then I quickly moved into the medical area. Started off with American Hospital Supply, the critical care division, which was primarily a pharmaceutical division. But what was really interesting for me there is they had a joint venture with American Edwards. And so we were JVing with the Swan-Ganz catheter. And that was my introduction into medical device. And what I found out about myself very early is I'm a device guy. Pharma, it didn't sit well with me. Selling conceptual molecules, that wasn't me. I liked having a device where you could put it in your hands, you can romance it, you can talk about it, you can really put it in the physician's hands and have the physician look at it, touch it, feel it. That's what kind of got me and grabbed me. So I started selling, moved up the sales ladder, became a product specialist and regional sales manager, director of sales for the U.S., and then transitioned over into marketing. Went up the marketing ladder as well, and then kind of moved into management or executive management. So I've been, the industries I've been in have been in radiology, cardiology, cardiothoracic surgery, spent 10 years in the heart valve market, and then kind of moved into the startup world doing ECG algorithms, and then founded a company that was dealing with technology for identifying and monitoring concussions, and then moved over into EM Device Lab.
Okay, excellent. And along this path, especially early in your career, you were carrying the bag and then you were starting to get your sales management positions, sales leadership positions. Was there any time that you thought, I want to be an executive leader, or when did that occur to you that, so not necessarily a startup leader, but just an executive leader? When did that start moving around in your brain that, gee, maybe I could be an executive leader?
It took a little bit to really come together. I think when you're first in any business, you're just trying to get your feet underneath you. You're just trying to master what you're responsible for. So in the sales side of things, you're just trying to learn the medical business, learn how to sell. And then once you do that, you say, okay, well, geez, my boss is doing this. I think I'd like to be a regional sales manager. And you kind of move there. And then as you get experience and master, okay, now I can start to see that I'd like to progress and do some different things. And different things kind of open up to you. When I was in sales and moving up the sales ladder, I really was focused on sales. It's just moving up in the sales progression. When I moved into marketing, that's when things kind of moved in a different direction for me, because what I really enjoy about marketing is it touches all aspects of the business. You're dealing with the salespeople. You've got upstream responsibilities, so you're dealing with R&D people. You're dealing with the finance people, the executive management of the company. So I always viewed myself as the hub of the wheel, because I'm dealing with everybody around here to bring new products in, to service existing products, and you've got the financial component of the business as well. So that's kind of where I considered myself to be someone who's responsible for more than just a functional area. I considered myself to be responsible more for the business of it, even though I knew I had my own area, but I was touching everywhere else and was involved with other things. So when I moved into marketing, I kind of said, okay, I can do this, and I can move up in responsibility to be able to take on the role.
Right. And I think another interesting thing about what you're explaining about marketing is that, in addition just to working with all these different functions, you're seeing how they all come together to make the company work. Whether the company's doing a great job at it or not, that's a different thing. But the fact that it's like being at the heartbeat of a company, the fact that you can see all the functional things working together to bring together the end result gives you a terrific view of what's going on.
You're absolutely right. And you are helping to make those decisions as well. So you're framing the product. You're dealing with the systems for R&D. You're coming up with what outcomes should be for the clinical trials. You're going down the financial planning of the product. So you've got that. So like I said, I consider myself to be at the hub of the wheel. And I think that marketing is in a great position to be able to take a leadership position in the company, because you've got exposure, and not only exposure, but you're learning what other functional areas do, and you're learning the things that go right and go wrong, and you're learning how those other people are behaving within your organization too. So I think there's some good learning that's taking place about how you can get things done within your organization based on dealing with everybody and the personalities that you're dealing with as well.
Exactly. Yeah, that's another great point. So in this career path, this career process that you're following, when did you start thinking startups, being entrepreneurial? I mean, there's a lot of things you can do, even in a large corporation, that are entrepreneurial. You can take an entrepreneurial approach to them. But where along this line did a little bell go off in your head that, gee, maybe I'd be interested in working in a startup environment and leading a startup team?
The first idea that really came to me was back when I was in sales and marketing back in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And I was involved with catheters in cardiology. And I saw a product that I thought was extremely interesting for closing foramen valleys, heart defect. And I saw that and I thought, boy, it's a pediatric device. And big companies typically don't want to go after pediatric indications. But I thought, boy, I could build a company based on pediatric cardiac devices. So I started having some discussions with the inventor of the product to see if we could do it. So that was kind of the first time that I thought, I want to investigate this startup side of things. Then in another company, I had another idea for another type of product, started to investigate that, but I didn't take the jump out of big company and to do that. And part of it is timing in your life. You know, I'm a father of four. You're raising a family, and those types of decisions should not be taken lightly, because you're not only affecting you, but you're affecting everybody else out there. And I'd never been a CEO before. I'd never raised money before. I didn't know what the process was. So you have these ideas of doing it, but being able to take that jump out is a big jump. And you have to understand everything about that in order to make a good decision for you and your family. I mean, I went down with one idea. I wrote the business plan. You know, I was doing it. I'm still employed, but I was doing it on weekends, writing a business plan, doing everything I possibly could to learn everything I possibly could, and decided that particular one wasn't right. It wasn't worth it to jump out with that much risk for that product. It turned out to be a good decision that I didn't do that. But then it took a few more years for it to really come in where I did my own. So I really, as an entrepreneur, you really have to look at where you are in your life and understand what it means to be in a startup. Because everyone always looks at, oh, geez, look at this guy's in a startup and he made a gazillion dollars. Well, guess what? 9 out of the 10 startups don't. And it's painful. There is pain, emotional and financial pain when you are not successful. So living, the startup life is a different life. And it's completely different than the big company life.
I agree with you 100%. I worked for a couple startups, one of which probably contained one of the best teams I ever worked with in my career. And they ultimately failed for a number of reasons that they didn't have entire control over, possibly some control over in terms of reading the market and so on. But, and I was gone before they went bankrupt, but it was a terrific team of people and they did a great job. But in terms of actually being a leader of the startup, when I worked for that startup, I was, I don't know, maybe the 35th or 40th person brought in or something like that. And they had not gone commercial. All the employees were regulatory, clinical, research, R&D, all this kind of stuff, pilot manufacturing. And I thought, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm working in a startup. Nope, it's not the same. It wasn't until I started my own company that I still have, where I sell some scientific equipment as part of what I do. And that's when I really realized all the risks that you're taking, and everything that can go wrong and the costs of it and so on and so forth. That's when I finally would start looking up to people that started companies and thinking, wow, I think I better understand what they've been through.
There's a difference in a startup that's already funded versus one that isn't.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the main thing, because if you're in a startup and you've got 10 million in the bank, payroll isn't an issue, and you're progressing along a pathway to getting a product out. Yeah, well, you're already in a company. But if you're the founder of a company with no dollars and you're trying to put together the plan and hit your milestones and raise money, that's a different animal. That is a different animal. And many times when we talk about startups, we really have to define, what we're talking about, because many times it is the funded startup that may need some marketing people, may need some sales people, may need, so you're progressing along. The true startups where you're with the napkin, and you've got the idea, and you've got to sell the idea, and you've got to figure out what the needs are, and you've got to figure out what functionals you need to bring in at what time. You need to do a full financial plan for it. You need to do diligence on the IP. You need to do diligence on the regulatory side of things. All of these things early on are just risk upon risk upon risk upon risk. And if you're joining once it's already been funded and all that risk has been taken out, that's a different jump than the true beginning of the startup.
Yeah, I'd agree with you 100%. And then what do you think are the key characteristics of being a CEO in a startup environment? And I know that's sort of a wide ranging question, because you could be the CEO of like you said, a startup that's on the verge of getting $50 million of funding because it's some breakthrough drug or something like that. Or you could be the startup of a relatively simple medical device that is going to save a lot of people a lot of trouble, create much better results, but still it's relatively simple. And has a shorter runway in some respects, but still, what are some of the key characteristics that you have to have as a CEO to be successful?
Ted, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can obtain the end goal. There's a lot of different ways to get there, but it's going to require different things for different people. Let me explain what I mean. I come at this with a lot of experience. Mm-hmm. Okay, I've got experience in sales, marketing, big companies, small companies, a lot of different technologies. I've been either launched or been on teams that have launched over 50 devices. I know the space. I know the doctors. I know a lot of the issues. I've dealt with the regulatory, clinical, anywhere from class 1, class 3 devices. So I'm coming at it with a lot of experience, but there's a lot of things that I don't know too. So from somebody with a lot of experience, I think experience is good, because if you've got that experience, you should be able to shortcut a lot of things, because you've seen it before, and you'll validate that it's still the same way it is, but you're not going to run into a lot of problems that people without experience don't have. That doesn't mean that if you don't have experience, you can't get there too. You just better be really open to a lot of people giving you a lot of advice, and you better be seeking that if you don't have the experience. So you can get there without the experience, but it's going to take drive to get there. Yeah, that is obvious. One of the obvious ones. It's going to take drive and perseverance. It's going to take somebody who can identify talent and bring that talent and give the vision to the company to say, this is what we're trying to do. This is how we're trying to get there. It takes a team mentality, because in a startup, you're CEO. Well, what does that mean? Okay, well, you're a team member. You're a team member, and you've got a role to play, just like everyone else has a role to play. But it's not an ego thing. It's, here's our team, and here's how we're trying to get this shared goal together. And I need to bring the right people in that aren't worried about, their 401k, aren't worried about, just company politics. All they want to focus on is getting the product done. So it's kind of a interesting question, because you can get there a lot of different ways. To me, it really is knowing exactly who you are and what you don't have, and being open to filling that up with expertise of others. Because if you try and do it yourself, you're going to fail. You have to bring other areas of other people's expertise into it. If you've never raised funds, you need somebody to help you, to guide you through that process. If you've never done regulatory, you better get a specialist. If you've never done quality or manufacturing or supply chain, you better get some help in there. So to me, I think that is one of the key things with an entrepreneur and with a CEO of a company, is recognizing what you don't know and being humble enough to say, I don't know, help me.
Right. And you have to be willing to work without a lot of resources.
That's a given. Absolutely. It is, you don't have the mothership that's going to bail you out when you make a mistake, when you run out of money, all of those things. You don't have a mothership to go back to. You have to solve the problem yourself. And, I think we've all had this. You're running down to the post office. You're typing your own memos. You're doing your own PowerPoints.
Well, I was the president of an Israeli, the U.S. operation for an Israeli company, a startup, and in the U.S. office we had 3 people, so I took my turn cleaning the bathroom.
Yeah.
So you can't have an ego that does not allow you to do those things. You have to do it. Another thing I'd go back to, especially about your career, and you and I talked a little bit about this in our preparatory discussions, is the value of the large company experience in the career as a foundation for so many things in the career, but also the things you learn in a couple large companies about how processes work. So when you are in charge of a startup, you can actually see many steps ahead as to what will need to be put in place as the company continues to make progress and prosper. Would you agree?
Oh, you're absolutely right, Ted. I am part of different startup ecosystems, and I get a lot of students, people that are just graduating, say, hey, I want to do startups, because for some reason they're teaching entrepreneurship within universities, and everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. And they come to me, hey, I want to work in a startup. And, well, I can appreciate you doing it, but my suggestion is that you go to a big company and get some foundations done. And if you want to jump out in 2-3 years, jump out and do that. But you've got to learn certain things. You're coming out of college. We've all done it. We've been in college, and we know how enthusiastic but unskilled we are when we actually graduate. Just learning how to go to a meeting, learning how to talk to a physician, learning what a performance evaluation looks like, learning how to work with other people, some real basic things within the company. And then within your own area, I mean, what does a product manager do? What does a director of marketing do? What does a process engineer do versus an R&D engineer? What does manufacturing have? So just getting exposure to some of this stuff as a company in general, and then your own functional area. It's how do you do business? What is the function that you're trying to do? Because if I'm hiring somebody in a startup company, let me tell you, I don't have time to go back and teach them how to tie their shoes. I mean, that's not what we need. Resources are so tight within a startup. You have to have somebody that knows what they're doing, because I don't have the time to teach people all types of little things. So that's where I know that people want to get into it, but to be valuable to a startup company, you have to bring something other than enthusiasm. You have to bring some knowledge.
Exactly. I think it's a really important point, because in the startup environment, you might not also have a ton of money, let's say, for recruiting. You definitely don't have on-the-job training funds. And so you're almost looking at somebody's resume and you're saying, okay, they have had these experiences with these companies. I know these large companies that this person came from had really rigorous recruiting processes of their own. So they had to go through quite a recruiting process to prove their value to even get in the door of that company. Then they succeeded at that company. That tells you a lot about a person right off the bat, and it saves you a lot of time and trouble as an entrepreneur, as a CEO of a company trying to recruit people. Those are important things. And just to have somebody come in with none of those experiences doesn't get you there.
You're right, Ted. And the other thing is, if you work at a large company, you know that there are large companies, there are mid-sized companies, there are small companies, and we know that about the industry. They've got different size companies. Well, there's different size startups as well. There's well-funded. I got 50 million in the bank, and I've got a 6-year product development schedule and clinicals to get to a whatever product. And then there's companies like mine where what we're doing is a simple device, and we're trying to bring that out, and we don't need the clinical trials. We don't need the heavy investment to be able to get there. So you've got different needs with different startups as well. So you can't just say all startups are the same, because a well-funded VC-backed startup is different than what I've got. So what we're doing is we're doing it with a lot less money, a lot less investment, a lot fewer people to be able to do that. But from a resource standpoint, like if I'm hiring somebody, they've got to do a lot of things, and they've got to have knowledge. So it may not be as critical for the large, well-funded startup, but it is for me. So you really have to understand who you are and what you need along those pathways. And if you're looking to join a startup, you need to understand that too. Where are they? What's their funding source? And what do they need?
Now at EM Device Lab, you have made a lot of progress, as you were just alluding to, with not a lot of capital. How did you do that? What are some of the things that you did to be able to get as far as you have? Because you're going to launch in about a month, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So how did you get there in, gosh, 5 years if you include your advisory period of time, and then 4 years as a leader? How did you do this on such a low capital budget?
Well, there's several things in there. One is you're not going to do everything yourself. You're going to be outsourcing a lot of things. So it's outsourcing what you know that you can, and because people are your most expensive asset in the early side of things. So you're really looking for expertise in particular areas. And what I mean by that is we don't have a regulatory full-time regulatory person, but we've got a regulatory consultant that I've worked with for close to 10 years now, and she's excellent. I know what to expect from her, and I know what we need. I know that we don't need a full-time person. I know exactly what we need in terms of putting a quality system in place and doing the filings. So I know what we need there. So I know that I can outsource that. On the product development side, we looked for, we knew what components that we needed to have. We designed the product ourselves, but we didn't make the product ourselves. We outsourced that, and we came up with different OEMs, different partners that were making components for us. And then it's a pay-as-you-go type of thing. But we didn't hire a development firm to completely design our product. We designed the product, and then we outsourced different pieces of it. So there's some savings there. And then it's, how big is the team? We kept the team extremely small. We've got 2 ER physicians. Well, they don't need to take a salary. They're employed outside as well. And then when you don't have the money, you go without the salary. Mm-hmm. So that is the other thing about the startup world too. Are you all in? or are you partially in? So there have been periods of time where we said, okay, we want to get to the next milestone. We won't be taking a salary for a period of time. And when I say a period of time, I mean a period of time. So it is not a month, and it can go longer. But you're also looking at what is the long game here, because every time you go out and raise money, you're giving up equity. So we're all shareholders in the company. If we are giving up a little bit in salary as we're going at, the objective is to make that down the road. So it's holding on to the equity. But you also have to have the right people that are able to do that, because not everyone's able to do that.
Right, exactly.
So you have to know what you're getting into. And that's, when we talk to people that are coming to the team, and, you have to be completely transparent, completely honest with them and say, this is what we're doing. We've gone some time without salaries to get to the next level. And nobody wants to do that. Believe me, nobody wants to do that. But if that's what's necessary, that's what's necessary.
Sure.
So you look at all of those things. And fortunately, we didn't have to do clinical trials with this device because of the regulatory pathway of it. So that cuts down on a lot of the money too. So you have to know exactly what you have and what you need to get to market. Sometimes it's going to require millions of dollars for development and product. Ours didn't. And that's why you're able to get there with less money. But then you put all these other things on top of it as well.
Right. Excellent. Okay. Thank you for that. And then what are some of the key strategic steps you took along the way with EM Device Lab, to position it for success? And you had mentioned a few things regarding, the product in the marketplace, understanding the need, things like that.
Well, I'm going to stop right there and say that is the most important thing. It's understanding the marketplace, and customer validation and customer discovery is one of the things that will bite every startup company that doesn't do it properly. You need to understand your market. You need to understand your product and how it fits within your customer's ecosystem. And unless you do, and until you do, you don't even start designing your product. You really have to understand whether a market exists and whether you can solve the problems that market has. We've all been there where we get a product, we launch it, and it's a big dud. It just hits the floor with a big thud. So what really that is all about is somebody didn't do their job properly in defining a market and defining your product. So we spent a boatload of time understanding our customer and our market. We've talked to over 600 clinicians in the product discovery process. And these were clinicians who either we talked to and had interviews with individually or tried our product. About half of them have tried our product either in cadavers or in simulated models. And we've gotten feedback on anywhere from a particular attribute of the product to the market, to what their pain points are, to what pricing sensitivity looks like, to people within buying groups, within supply chain. How should it be packaged? How should it be boxed? How many per box? What the issues are with ordering a product. So all of those things are part of the product. It's not just the device, it's the product that you're trying to market. And we've spent a lot of time doing that. And let me tell you, we're going to be wrong on some things. So everyone who's done customer discovery knows you think you know what you've got, but it really all boils down to, once you hit the marketplace, is somebody going to take their hard-earned cash and pay for it? But all of these things that I described in talking to 600 people will help the probability of success. It won't make it infallible. It's not going to be 100%, but it's going to be a heck of a lot better than if you didn't do those things. And that's one of the problems I think we've got in industry is we always assume that we know. I know my customers. I've been in this business for a long period of time, and we don't double check these things. And then when we get the feedback from the physician or from the supply chain or whoever, we believe it. And you have to dig deeper. Are they really telling me what the real deal is? Or are they telling me what I want to know? Or am I hearing what I want to hear? So you really have to dig deeper into, am I really getting at the real truth? And those are some of the areas that I think all of us in the industry, and specifically the audience that we're talking to today, the marketing audience, needs to take another look at anytime that you're developing either a startup new product or a new product or new offering in an existing company. And in my experience, the most difficult thing in an existing company is to go out and talk to a bunch of customers because we think we know. And believe me, we don't.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, because if you look at the med tech industry or medical device industry, so many of the companies are founded off of a technological drive. So an engineer or a doctor invents something because they see a problem and they see a need, and they invent something to fix it. Although it could be within a very limited window of how they have viewed this need that needs to be fixed. And so they talk to a few of their best friends that might be healthcare providers of some sort. And those people tend to agree with them because they're all friends. And so they get this feeling that the whole market's going to agree with them. And they could be very, very wrong. I've seen this really backfire on people.
Absolutely. I had experience. We were going to launch a heart valve in the U.S. and there was one heart valve that was out there. St. Jude valve had been out there for a long period of time, and we talked to a bunch of customers, and they said, "Oh, we can't wait till you guys get here." The company was Carbomedics. We can't wait till Carbomedics hits the marketplace because St. Jude has been charging us a whole lot of money for this thing. We know that we're really looking for an alternative. We hit the marketplace and it was like crickets. Okay, nothing. And it all boiled down to, the saying in the industry was, people, a doctor will change wives before he changes heart valves because their reputation goes with them with every implant. So that type of a decision is such a big decision, and a lot of that talk is just talk. You'll never know until you provide that product out in the marketplace and they give you the real feedback, which is, am I buying or not buying?
Right. Now, when you and I were talking the other week, you mentioned a place where you thought you had a failure on your hands, running a company, and what you learned from that. Could you reflect on that?
Well, I did have a failure. So the last company that I did was a company called Neuro Chaos. And what we're doing is we're using transcranial Doppler ultrasound to assess traumatic brain injury. And it was a special software algorithm that could look at cerebral blood flow velocity and ascertain whether someone had suffered a TBI, and also could track to see whether that patient recovered. And so we were applying it to the concussion marketplace. And really exciting technology. And what we found is we actually we could see when someone was injured, and we could track as they recovered. So we were really excited about it. And then in the customer discovery stuff that we did, we talked to all kinds of clinicians about this big need. Everybody knows, you hear a concussion, you know what the issues were. And the need for it, both in the military, sports, big need. So we said, okay, we've got that. We know who's going to use it. Well, actually, we didn't, because in the clinical study of that, what we were assuming that this is a post-injury product. But what it turned out to be is our technology had to have a healthy test, a healthy baseline of that patient before they had their injury. So if you can imagine this, every football player, every person in the military, they get a test, they get an ultrasound of their brain. And then if they get injured, then you have something to compare it to. Mm-hmm. And in the case of, hey, I got a concussion. Now we're just going to continue to test them on a daily basis every other day. And you can see that they're approaching their baseline. Now it's safe to go back. That's what the technology was all about. But when we discovered that we had to have that healthy baseline test, well, that took it from a post-injury setting to a pre-injury setting. So now we're not marketing to doctors because the doctors only treat injured patients. They don't treat well patients. So now how do you get that in? Well, you're going to market it to schools. Schools can't afford it. A school athletic training budget is less than $10,000 a year. And our test is $75 a pop. So we could not market it to schools. So now it's, who else do you market it to? Parents. Well, marketing to parents means you have to educate a marketplace on the problem. You have to educate them on your solution. You have to tell them the school's not paying for it, you pay for it. Then you have to get a mechanism for that to occur. And now all of a sudden we go from selling devices to selling service. So we've got to put that in place. And we've got that other component in marketing to the public. So even though we had a technology that worked, and even though we had done our diligence, we had not done our diligence with that particular permutation that we didn't anticipate that we were going to have that healthy baseline. And when we did find that out, it kind of sunk us because we didn't have the resources, and the market was not willing to buy that product at the consumer level. So we had to close the company down. Even though we had a technology that worked, we had to close the company down, and it was failed due to business model, not due to product. So that's where, kind of a story from that needs analysis and from that customer discovery standpoint. Even though you think you've done it all well, it changes. I'm a big one that your medical device is not the same today as it is tomorrow. We discovered that our product was different at the front end, but everyone who launches a medical device, they launch it without tremendous amount of clinical data. And then that data comes in later. So the device that you launch today is not the same device that you have a year from now, because now you've got clinical data. Now you've got key opinion leaders are doing it. So you have to know exactly which device you're launching today and to whom in order to really market it and have the expectations properly, because it changes, just like our product changed.
Right. That's a great story and a great learning experience.
Painful too.
Yeah, it's very painful. Gosh, it's never any fun to have something like that happen.
Well, it's funny because everyone always talks about their successes, but they don't talk about their failures.
Right.
And we all have them.
Right. So, in a month, you're going to be preparing for your soft launch of the EM Lab device. Anything keeping you awake at night right now?
Well, it's always about sales, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, we develop it, we get all excited about it. And what I've been telling our investors, telling our team is we're working our tails off to get to the starting line. Okay. We're not at the starting line yet. The company's been going, but the starting line is the first day that you start selling. So it all comes down. We've all been fooled. We've been fooled by people who said, yeah, I want it. And then when they actually get there, are they going to buy it? Are they going to change? We feel that we've talked to enough people to know that there's a substantial market. We believe that the price point is a good price point. We believe that the benefits of the product are across multiple different people within the different customer segments. So we feel good about it, but you're always anxious for that first sale. And the other thing is, when you're in a startup, you're working so hard to get to that starting line that you don't have time, and FDA will not allow you to pre-sell anything. So you're starting at the starting line from a dead stop, and then you have to start picking it up. And soft launches are there for a particular reason. I mean, you want to validate everything. You want to validate the product is perfect, your marketing message is perfect. You want to, all of your educational materials are perfect. So you're trying to do that from a soft launch standpoint. But what keeps me up right now is we got to finish doing the last little bit on the paperwork to finish that off. That's I'm confident we'll get there. It's when sales start. Is the product going to perform? We believe it will, but it's the sales.
Well, in one way, though, you're not starting from a dead stop, because you did work with 600 clinicians in the evaluation process, the deep learning process that you described earlier. And you can go back to those people and say, thank you, now we're on the market. I mean, in a way, you do have a resource. I mean, still, I agree with you. I'd be nervous as heck about that first order and feel really good when it came in. But I think you've done some stuff, because there are things you can do. For example, I'm working with several companies right now, and let's see, 3 of them are not launching until 2024, and we're talking about early capture of information on innovators and early adopters and so on. So, which is pre-marketing, which is legal. You just, you're not selling anything, but you're, other than awareness and interest.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, we've done that. We've captured the people that we've talked to. We know, in our particular instance, it's emergency medicine physicians. So we know who they are, where they reside, and we'll be, we know where we're going to go to first. But soft launches are there for a reason. You're trying to validate everything, and then you scale it up after you validated key things that you want to learn.
Sure. And as we get around to closing this out, I always ask people, do you have any books that you recommend to people that are in this kind of career, whether they're early in the career or moving into leadership positions? Is there anything that you recommend?
Well, there's a couple of books that have been instrumental to me. So I grew up in Wisconsin, and I grew up in Wisconsin in the 60s. So Ted, can you think of something that was going on in Wisconsin in the 60s that was pretty important to a young boy?
Oh, the Packers?
The Green Bay Packers. So yeah, I've been a big football guy through my life. But David Marinas wrote a book back about 20 years ago, and it had a real impact on me. And it's a book called When Pride Still Mattered, and it was a biography of Vince Lombardi. And he's written books on Obama and Clinton, and done Roberto Clemente. So he's written some really good biographies. But what was really interesting to me is not how he did the power sweep, or what he did on the football field. What was revealing to me is the price of success. And what I mean by that is he was extremely successful in getting championships, but it came at a personal cost to him. His marriage was not what it should have been. His relationship with his children was not what it should have been. So when I read that book, it really helped me to understand that being a CEO of a successful company is not the end game. It's to have a well-rounded life. Because I think you talk to different people. Oh, Steve Jobs, he's a great leader. And well, Apple is a great company, but we all have heard the stories about Steve Jobs' personal life and other people's that have been extremely successful entrepreneurs, but it comes with the cost of the personal life. I'm not willing to do that. Okay. If you want a CEO who wants to only live, breathe, and build their company at the detriment of the rest of their life, I'm not your guy. And that's not the type of person that I would want to be associated with. We are here for well-rounded lives. Yes, absolute. We need to be successful in our jobs, but we are not myopic. We cannot make one part of our life so dominant that we have carnage in the rest of our lives. So when I read that book and one of my idols, and I saw the cost of success, it really opened my eyes to what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do.
That's excellent. Well, thank you for that, because we're going to have that book in the show notes, plus a link to your podcast, your LinkedIn profile, the EM Device Lab website, and so on. So there'll be a number of things in the show notes for listeners and viewers to look for. Any other final thoughts that you have for the listeners regarding leadership and personal growth?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, Ted, is that in order to grow, you have to master what you're doing today. So if you want to be a CEO, you're not going to get there by wishing it occurs. You have to be the best at what you're doing right now. So in order, when you're promoting people, you're not promoting people at the bottom, okay? You're promoting people that have achieved things within their current role. So if you want to grow, the first thing you need to do is be successful in what you're doing today. And that is the bedrock that you build it on. But then you also need to look at how you can promote yourself, that this is, I've got aspirations that I want to do something else. And not be a self-promoter. I think we all kind of know that person.
Right.
That's not somebody that we want to be. But it's a frank discussion to say, this is where I'd like to go. Can you help me get there? And get your mentors within your company to make it known that you want to get there. But it always starts with, I've got to be the best person that I can in the current role that I'm in. And part of that is understanding everyone else's role in there too. So to allow you to do your job better by getting to know other people in other areas. So one of the things, just a simple thing, when COVID's done and we're able to go to cocktail parties and company functions again, don't hang out with your buddies. Okay, don't just, if you're in a marketing, don't hang with the marketing crowd. Go into a different crowd. Learn what they're doing. Get to know other people. It's a matter of building a wider community. If you want to grow and if you want to take that next move up the organization, make it your mission to go out and develop those other relationships, because at some point in time, those people or those functions may be reporting to you. And if you know them and know their functional area, that will help prepare you for your next step.
Great advice. Great advice. Thank you very much. And like I've told a couple other previous guests, and this will especially relate to you, I look forward to interviewing you again in about a year, if not sooner, to find out how the launch went.
No problem, Ted. And keep doing what you're doing. It's a great service to people within the industry. Love this podcast.
All right. Well, thanks again, Pat. Thanks for being on with us today.
Thank you.
The important questions are, do you know who you are? And that is as a person and as a company. If you are the leader of a startup or the leader of any organization, do you know who you are? And the other question is, do you know what you don't know? You can tell that many of Pat's actions are taken from not only what he learned in success, but also what he learned in failure. And he has applied that heavily in the area of customer discovery. As your company explores new products or services, are you digging deep enough in the area of customer discovery? Or as you work in your position day in and day out, are you learning how to really listen to your customer to be sure you're doing all you can do to be a valuable partner? And my final question is, are you mastering what you are doing today? Plenty to think about, even for a consultant like myself. Now, take something from this podcast and go win your week.